At a height of 828 meters, Burj Khalifa is the proud pinnacle of humanity. But beneath that luxurious glass facade lies a bitter truth. The 244-meter pinnacle of the tower is entirely uninhabitable. The foundation is submerged in saline desert groundwater that is many times saltier than seawater. At a depth of just 2.5 meters, the authorities had to approve an emergency budget of $8.16 billion just to dig tunnels to salvage the flooding infrastructure. The surface glamour is being eroded by a cathodic protection system that must run 24/7, a cooling load of 46 megawatts of electricity per day, and the threat of losing status to rival megaprojects. Dubai is no longer developing. They are spending billions of dollars each year just to hold on to a symbol that is draining resources. Don't believe it? Then let's peel back each layer of the underground ruins beneath the tallest building in the world right now. Look at the Burj Khalifa tower reaching 828 meters high, costing $1.5 billion. A magnificent illusion, a monument to greed erected in the desert. But what if I told you that this most luxurious glass box on the planet is actually just a large-scale marketing gimmick? That is the center of the Emaar Properties Group, a global speculative money-sucking machine. Dubai has operated under an extremely audacious planning philosophy. Build the surface first, the underground infrastructure later. Everything must be polished and the media first. They bought prosperity with world records to cover up an unsustainable foundation. Then what was bound to happen happened. The financial crisis of 2008 poured a bucket of cold water on the euphoria. The project was on the brink of bankruptcy. To save the national face, the neighboring state of Abu Dhabi had to inject an emergency aid of $10 billion. Of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch. The immediate political price? The tower had to be renamed from Burj Dubai to Burj Khalifa to honor the ruler of Abu Dhabi. Bitter, isn't it? Even before the inauguration ceremony, Dubai's proudest symbol was already a debtor living off someone else's support. The rapid development speed created one of the highest vertical population densities in the world. But it was completely disconnected from the underlying infrastructure capacity. A 500-ton structure weighs down on a loose sand foundation. That is the consequence when humans think that money can crush the laws of nature. When the speculative cash flow cools down, the enormous operating costs come back to bite investors' finances. Dubai suddenly realized they possessed a media wonder, but with an operational system that had already reached its risk ceiling. Have you ever looked back at modern cities and wondered, are we living in an era where long-term safety is being sold cheaply just to exchange for a few dazzling media photos and a symbol revived with $10 billion in debt? Is that an economic miracle, or just an expensive sleight of hand? Please leave your comments in the section below. But remember, the enormous debt on paper is not the scariest thing yet. Because right now, beneath the desert ground, a silent chemical war is taking place. Knowing at the foundation of this structure, above are the magnificent glass and steel, but below is a chemical battlefield. Forget New York or Tokyo, where skyscrapers are firmly anchored to solid rock foundations. Burj Khalifa stands on loose sand and soft sedimentary rock. Moreover, the desert groundwater here is at a very shallow depth, only 2.5 to 3 meters below the surface, and that's not fresh water, adjacent to the Persian Gulf. This groundwater has a terrifying salinity, thick with sulfate and chloride ions at concentrations far exceeding those of normal seawater, a true chemical poison for concrete. Chloride ions penetrate the protective layer, causing rust and swelling of the internal steel reinforcement. Meanwhile, sulfate ions attack the aluminate in cement, creating ettringite minerals that crack and break the concrete from the core. To prevent the 500-ton mass from sinking, 192 friction piles, each 50 meters deep, along with a 12,500 cubic meter concrete raft foundation, were driven into the ground. The entire massive concrete block must remain continuously submerged in this intensely corrosive environment. The engineer solution? They implemented a cathodic protection system using impressed current, making it run 24/7 without a second of rest by laying a titanium anode grid and continuously sending direct current into the steel frame. They turn the entire foundation into a cathode to trick the corrosion reactions into changing direction, an eternal electrochemical war. What if this system loses power? The process of reinforced concrete decomposition will begin immediately. But what if the voltage is pushed too high? The phenomenon of hydrogen embrittlement occurs, causing the expensive steel structure to become brittle and buckle under load. Dubai is forced to bear the costs of continuous erosion audits and expensive voltage monitoring for 100 years. A tiger riding the current. Interesting, isn't it? Would you be willing to spend millions of dollars to live in an 8 to 8 meter tower, knowing that its life depends entirely on a power supply that must never be turned off? And how long will the cost of waging an eternal war against the Earth's chemistry last before it devours the entire commercial value of this project? Please share your perspective below. However, the silent gnawing beneath the foundation is not the only ticking time bomb, because while the foundation of the building is bearing the electrical load, the drainage system of the entire city above had already collapsed beforehand. The rupture between the ultra-modern exterior and the dilapidated underground infrastructure is the most expensive technical debt in the history of urban planning. Let's go back to the moment right after the inauguration. A ridiculous truth emerged right after the inauguration. The underground sewage system was not capable of handling the enormous amount of waste discharged from hundreds of vertical floors. What was the solution for the future megacity? Thousands of wastewater tankers were deployed, lining up endlessly one after another to transport sewage to treatment facilities every single day, even after the sewer network was connected. The drainage capacity in this super dense area remained under extreme stress. Then came the greatest test in April 2024. A record-breaking rainstorm, the heaviest in 75 years, struck Dubai. The entire urban plan, which had been designed on the assumption that the desert would never flood, completely collapsed. The magnificent downtown Dubai district was brought to a standstill because there was no large-scale gravity-fed underground rainwater drainage system. The water had nowhere to go except into underground tunnels, flooded basements, and expensive mechanical, electrical, and plumbing MEP systems. It was the heavy price of prioritizing glamorous appearances while neglecting the essential underground infrastructure. Faced with the disaster, the Dubai authorities were forced to allocate $30 billion aid, approximately $8.16 billion, for the Tasrif underground drainage tunnel project. They had to deploy gigantic TBM tunnel boring machine systems to excavate tunnels continuously from 2024 to 2033, aiming to increase drainage capacity by 700% and discharge 230 cubic meters of water per second. That $8.16 billion was not an investment for future development. It was the enormous price of paying off years of neglected technical debt. Can a city proudly call itself the city of the future when it must spend more than $8 billion just to fix a basic infrastructure mistake? And as climate change continues to bring more extreme weather events, how much money will be enough to protect the expensive glass towers standing in the middle of the desert? However, the battle against disasters falling from the sky is only half the story. The other half is the enormous amount of resources that this concrete giant consumes every single day just to sustain life. Maintaining a luxurious paradise under the scorching 50°C desert sun comes at an extraordinary cost. Maintaining a luxurious paradise under the scorching 50°C desert sun comes at an extraordinary cost. To keep the air inside cool at all times, the Burj Khalifa's air conditioning system must operate with a maximum cooling capacity of 46 megawatts, equivalent to the energy required to melt 10,000 to 13,000 tons of ice every day during peak hours. Its total power consumption reaches 50 MW. Can you imagine that? It's equivalent to turning on approximately 500,000 100-watt light bulbs at the same time. And that's not all. The tower also consumes an average of about 946,000 liters of fresh water every day. To pump that water to a record height of 828 meters, a network of tiered booster pumps operates continuously through more than 100 kilometers of pipelines. But where does a desert city get so much fresh water? Every drop of water used in Dubai comes from desalination plants that consume enormous amounts of energy. And this is where the hidden environmental disaster begins. The desalination process releases millions of cubic meters of superheated, highly saline water mixed with chemicals back into the Persian Gulf. Today, the Persian Gulf receives more than 50% of the world's desalination wastewater. This turns large areas of the sea into an increasingly salty and overheated environment, damaging coral reefs and suffocating coastal marine ecosystems. Ironically, the increasing salinity also accelerates the corrosion of desalination equipment and reduces the efficiency of future freshwater production, creating a never-ending ecological cycle. Even if developers highlight the collection of condensation water to irrigate landscaping, it is little more than a small green patch covering a much larger environmental problem. The luxurious lifestyle inside the tower is being exchanged for the environmental degradation of an entire region. Is living in luxury at an altitude of 828 meters really worth sacrificing the health of an entire sea? And what happens when the cost of energy and natural resources eventually exceeds what the economy can sustain? Please share your opinion in the comments. However, this massive consumption of resources becomes even more shocking when we examine the true architectural design hidden inside the building. If you dissect the structure of the Burj Khalifa, you will see this extravagance reach its peak. With the concept of vanity height, about 29% of the tower's total height, approximately 244 meters of the upper spire, is completely empty and contains no commercial or usable space. To put that into perspective, this unused spire alone is taller than many of the most expensive office skyscrapers in Europe and North America. Why was it built? Simply to secure the title of the world's tallest building. It does not generate a single dollar in rental income or commercial revenue, yet those 244 meters of empty space still require millions of dollars every year for window cleaning, anti-corrosion treatments, maintenance of wind-resistant systems, and structural upkeep. An extraordinary amount of architectural waste. But the darkest part of the story is not hidden in the steel spire. It lies in the human cost behind the project. This magnificent landmark was built with the sweat and sacrifices of tens of thousands of low-income migrant workers from South Asia. While wealthy tourists admire the luxury above, many of the workers who built the tower lived in overcrowded labor camps such as Sonipur. Far from the glamorous skyline, low wages and extremely demanding working conditions became the hidden mechanism that kept construction costs under control for Dubai's megaprojects. Today, as living costs continue to rise and international pressure for stronger labor rights increases, that low-cost model is beginning to crack. The contrast between the multi-million-dollar luxury apartments at the top of the tower and the cramped living conditions in Sonipur has created a deep social divide. Is it reasonable to spend tens of millions of dollars every year simply to maintain 244 meters of empty space just to preserve a world record? And how long can a development model built on such human sacrifice survive in a world with increasingly strict labor standards? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Ironically, the title that required enormous financial resources and human effort is now under serious threat from a neighboring rival. The very world record that justified all the cost and risk of Burj Khalifa may soon disappear. That rival is Jeddah Tower in Saudi Arabia, designed to exceed 1,000 meters in height. With more than 167 commercial floors, Jeddah Tower is set to surpass Burj Khalifa's 828 meters after years of delays. Construction has officially resumed and is now moving toward its expected completion after years of delays. Construction has officially resumed and is accelerating toward its expected completion in 2028. Created by the same architect, Adrian Smith, Jeddah Tower is a key part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 strategy. The day Jeddah Tower reaches its full height, Burj Khalifa will officially lose its title as the tallest building in the world. That is not merely a symbolic loss. It strikes directly at the core business model of Emaar Properties and the entire downtown Dubai development. Understand The reality, Burj Khalifa has always functioned as a loss leader, a massive marketing tool that was willing to operate at a loss or simply break even. Its real mission was to create a world-famous landmark that would increase the value of surrounding real estate, shopping malls, hotels, and luxury developments. Once it is no longer the tallest building on earth, that powerful marketing advantage could begin to fade. Saudi Arabia is now applying the very same strategy Dubai once used, but with even greater financial resources backed by its oil wealth. If Burj Khalifa loses its global spotlight, it risks becoming an extremely expensive asset that continues to demand enormous maintenance and operating costs while generating far less economic influence. When an entire business model depends on holding the title of the world's tallest building, what happens when someone else builds something even taller? Will Dubai discover a new competitive advantage? Or will it simply watch the race for height move across the border into Saudi Arabia? Please share your thoughts in the comments. And this is where the sunk cost fallacy begins to appear, turning what was once a global icon into a financial burden that cannot easily be abandoned. Geotechnical risks, aging infrastructure, environmental pressures, and rising competition are all converging at the same time. Abandoning the tower is impossible because of national pride, but keeping it operational is becoming increasingly expensive. After more than 15 years of operation, many of its mechanical, electrical, and plumbing map systems, sandstorm-resistant glass panels, and especially the impressed current cathodic protection (XCC) system are entering an advanced stage of aging. Maintenance and replacement costs continue to rise dramatically, requiring hundreds of millions of dollars every year simply to keep the tower operating safely. The maintenance and replacement costs of components continue to rise exponentially, requiring hundreds of millions of USD to be spent every year just to keep the tower in a minimally safe operating condition. Meanwhile, the city's budget is already under enormous pressure from mega infrastructure projects such as the Tasrif underground drainage project, which alone costs more than 8 billion USD. Residents are also forced to bear increasingly expensive service charges, rising electricity bills, and higher water prices to offset the enormous cost of seawater desalination. At the same time, the ecosystem of the Persian Gulf continues to deteriorate under millions of cubic meters of highly concentrated saline wastewater. Burj Khalifa is unlikely to collapse mechanically anytime soon. However, it has exposed the philosophical collapse of an urban development model built on spectacle rather than long-term sustainability. This project stands as powerful evidence that financial ambition and short-term prestige cannot override the laws of geotechnical engineering and natural ecology. A monument financed with emergency debt, protected by an uninterrupted power supply, and maintained at the cost of environmental degradation. When the glamorous exterior is stripped away, what remains is an extremely expensive concrete tower standing in the middle of the desert. Perhaps the real question is not how tall we can build. Perhaps the real question is this: do we build cities to improve people's lives, or simply to showcase the ambitions of financial empires? And is the costly lesson from Dubai enough to warn other cities that are racing toward record-breaking construction without fully considering the future? When the Golden Throne is no longer unique and decades of infrastructure burdens finally reach their breaking point, Dubai will face a life or death decision. What is the future of this iconic landmark? The first and most expensive option is to transform Burj Khalifa from a profit-generating business asset into a national heritage monument, like the Eiffel Tower in France or the Statue of Liberty in the United States. The government would continuously subsidize its operating losses with public funds. That means covering the enormous costs of electricity, desalination, and the XCC cathodic protection systems simply to preserve the nation's most famous symbol. At that point, Burj Khalifa would effectively become a giant vertical museum, relying primarily on tourism instead of real estate income. The second possible future is a far more radical one. Dubai may eventually be forced to spend billions of dollars replacing outdated energy systems and aging mechanical infrastructure with modern green technologies that could include installing next-generation solar systems, upgrading cooling technology, and creating more efficient closed-loop water recycling systems. However, carrying out such upgrades on a 500-ton structure standing on deep foundations surrounded by highly saline groundwater would represent one of the greatest engineering challenges ever attempted. Then comes the third and most pessimistic scenario. Capital begins flowing away as investors shift their attention towards Saudi Arabia and other emerging financial centers. Occupancy rates decline. Extremely high maintenance fees drive tenants away. Large sections of the tower become empty, creating silent ghost floors suspended high above the city. An enormous concrete monument remains standing while the global race for urban development moves elsewhere. Will Dubai choose to spend tens of billions of dollars preserving an aging icon? Or will it eventually accept that Burj Khalifa has become an expensive historical lesson about the limits of human ambition? If you were an urban planner, what solution would you choose to save this 8 to 8 meter glass giant? Burj Khalifa and Dubai's rapid development are not simply stories about a skyscraper or a desert city. They are perhaps the clearest reflection of humanity's desire for prestige and record-breaking achievement in the modern era. A world where spectacular media images are often prioritized over long-term sustainability. A world where financial power is expected to overcome the laws of geology and natural ecology. But when speculative investment slows and world records are eventually broken by someone else, the accumulated costs of technical debt, environmental damage, and endless maintenance always remain. The truth hidden beneath every megastructure is simple. A strong foundation can never be built on illusion. If you had the choice, would you rather live in a safe, sustainable, and modest city, or in a magnificent, record-breaking metropolis constantly facing hidden systemic risks beneath the surface? Leave your opinion in the comments so we can discuss. If you found this video insightful and thought-provoking, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss our next in-depth analysis. Your support is the biggest motivation for us to continue creating high-quality content. Disclaimer: this video is based on publicly available information, technical data, architectural reports, environmental studies, and economic analyses from reputable sources. The purpose of this content is to present perspectives and discuss urban planning, geotechnical engineering, and business models. It is not intended to personally attack any individual, organization, religion, or country. Images and documentary materials are used under the principle of fair use for educational, analytical, and commentary purposes.